As we are well aware, the phenomenon of people going missing has a history dating back to ancient times. While mentions of ordinary individuals who disappear are relatively scarce in historical records, famous names from time to time emerge in the annals of history. For instance, in 1021, Abu Ali Mansur, the ruler of the Fatimid dynasty, ventured into the mountains near Cairo and never returned. Search parties sent to find him discovered only his abandoned donkey and bloodied garments. Another tale, occurring 462 years later, tells of the disappearance of Princes Edward V and his brother Richard from the Tower of London. Centuries later, the discovery of two young skeletons of the same age at the base of a staircase added a chilling chapter to this mystery. Evidently, vanished royalty remains etched in our collective memory, while countless other stories of ordinary people fade into obscurity. However, it's essential to note that not all missing individuals remain lost. There are instances of abducted children growing up and being found decades later, or adults relocating to different cities or countries, only to be rediscovered by chance. It is these stories of rediscovery that we will explore. Alexander Selkirk. Alexander Selkirk stands out as one of the most renowned individuals who went missing in history, yet it's highly likely that his name is unfamiliar to you. This obscurity arises from the fact that his story only gained widespread recognition after it was fictionalized, with his character being bestowed the resonant name Robinson Crusoe. While it wouldn't be accurate to describe Selkirk as completely missing, as there were those who knew of his whereabouts, his tale begins with a 21-year-old ship captain who unintentionally marooned him on an uninhabited island located 672 kilometers off the coast of Chile. Selkirk's stubborn and headstrong nature had so infuriated the crew that, when he declared, "I refuse to remain on this wretched vessel any longer," the captain promptly granted his wish. However, once Selkirk realized that no one else would join him in enduring life on a deserted island, he implored the captain to reconsider. Regrettably, the 21-year-old, burdened with an excessive responsibility, predictably declined to take him back. The ship weighed anchor, leaving Alexander to fend for himself for a grueling span of 4 years and 4 months. Fortunately, the island teemed with wildlife, allowing him to sustain himself on a varied diet of seafood, goats, watercress, and turnips. When a passing ship eventually rescued Selkirk, his saviors were struck by his feral appearance and animal-like behaviors. His extended solitude had seemingly erased his ability to communicate, leaving the crew struggling to decipher his halting speech. Cynthia Ann Parker. In the early 1800 seconds, American colonizers were actively reclaiming land from the indigenous Indian populations, leading to a noticeable decline in their numbers. In response to this loss, some Native Americans resorted to kidnapping children from the new American settlers. Among these victims was Cynthia Ann Parker, who, at the age of 9, was abducted by the Comanche Indian Nation from her family's farm in Texas. Parker remained missing for 24 years, occasionally appearing within the Comanche community. She eventually married the tribe's chief, had 3 children, and likely would have continued living among the Comanches until her passing if not for the intervention of the Texas Rangers, who sought to rescue Cynthia and her young daughter. However, her reunion with her birth family did not bring her the happiness she had hoped for. Parker struggled to adapt to life in the white settlements, and despite being a grown woman capable of making her own choices, she was denied the opportunity to return to the Comanches, and her 2 sons, one of whom, Quanah Parker, would go on to become one of the most influential Comanche chiefs in history. Accounts regarding Cynthia's possible death between 1864 and 1871 vary and often conflict. Some even suggest that she may have voluntarily starved herself to death due to her deep longing for her former life among the Comanches. Yakoi Shoichi. World War II came to an end in 1945, but for some, the war's conclusion didn't unfold as expected. Amid the celebrations of the Allies and Soviets, a perplexing dilemma confronted thousands of Japanese soldiers who had received unwavering orders to never surrender. They pondered their next move. In 1944, following the Japanese defeat in the Battle of Guam, approximately 5,000 of their soldiers chose to retreat into the jungle, embarking on guerrilla warfare and subsisting on a diet of rats and frogs for all their meals. While the majority of these Japanese soldiers were either captured or met their fate within a few months, there were a select few who excelled at evading discovery. As the war concluded, families in Japan anxiously awaited news about their missing loved ones, while 10 Japanese soldiers continued to defy surrender and persisted in living on Guam. Among them was Yakoi Shoichi. Over the years, his comrades either perished or yielded, and by 1964, he stood as the sole survivor. Yet, he persevered in his solitary jungle existence until 1972, when he encountered a pair of local fishermen. A confrontation unfolded, leading to Yakoi's defeat, capture, and eventual repatriation to Japan. Strangely, he harbored no joy at the conclusion of his protracted ordeal, famously remarking, "I am painfully ashamed that I came back alive." Lawrence Joseph Bader. Admit it, at least once in your life, you've toyed with the idea of faking your own death, haven't you? Yet, for most of us, that notion remains in the realm of fantasy due to numerous compelling reasons, and we continue to navigate life, hoping for better days. However, there's an exception in the form of Lawrence Bader, a crockery salesman who dared to make this audacious move. He orchestrated his own demise and assumed a new identity for an astonishing 8 years. At the age of 30, Bader found himself grappling with overwhelming debts surpassing $20,000 compounded by significant tax woes. His wife was pregnant with their 4th child, and he bore the sole responsibility of providing for their sizable family. Worn down by this life, one fateful evening in 1957, he increased the coverage on a life insurance policy, packed a suitcase, and rented a boat on Lake Erie. Despite being warned of an impending perilous storm by the boat owner, he set out on a supposed fishing trip. Days later, an empty boat drifted ashore, bearing no trace of Bader, leading everyone to believe he had perished. Bader's assumed demise offered a financial reprieve to his wife, who received a payout of $39,500 from the insurance company, and a monthly benefit of $254 from Social Security. However, 8 years later, Lawrence's niece, Suzanne, unexpectedly encountered him at a fair where he was purchasing onions and fishing supplies. When she approached him, Bader feigned unfamiliarity and hastily departed. Suzanne's suspicions were aroused, and she discerned the name under which he now lived, John Johnson. John was married, had 2 children, and worked as a radio presenter. Subsequent fingerprint analysis confirmed that the man, known to all as Fritz, was indeed Lawrence Bader. Bader seemed to be well versed in his charade, yet he continued to insist that amnesia had clouded his past. He clung to this persona until his death, which occurred just 1 year after he revealed his secret, succumbing to cancer while still claiming to be John Johnson. Remarkably, 2 funerals were held in his honor, one for his new family and one for his first wife and her children. Lucy Ann Johnson. In 1961, Lucy Ann Johnson, an Alaskan native residing in Surrey, Canada, suddenly and inexplicably vanished from her life. She left behind her husband, Marvin, a 7-year-old daughter named Linda, and an 8-year-old son. What struck many as odd was that a formal missing persons report wasn't filed with the police until 3 years later, prompting suspicions. In light of these doubts, authorities even conducted an excavation of the backyard of the family's residence, hoping to uncover evidence of Johnson's fate, but the search yielded no answers. Fast forward to 2013, Lucy Johnson's grown daughter, also named Lucy, decided to publish a photograph of her mother in newspapers across northern British Columbia and the Yukon, regions where Lucy Ann Johnson had once lived among acquaintances. Remarkably, individuals came forward who recognized her, leading to a reunion between Linda and her long-lost mother. It then came to light that Lucy hadn't so much been missing as she had been fleeing from the oppression of her husband, who had effectively ousted her from their home. Lucy Johnson had remarried and even had a daughter, all while retaining her original name, a fact that underscores the challenges faced by the authorities in their quest to locate her. Subsequently, Lucy endeavored to re-establish contact with her husband and children, but her husband declined, keeping her continued existence concealed from everyone. Petra Pajitka. In 1984, a 24-year-old college student from Braunschweig, Germany, visited the dentist and mysteriously vanished. Just to put any irrational fears about dentists to rest, it's essential to clarify that the dentist had no involvement in her disappearance. Petra Pajica didn't meet an unfortunate end due to dental work. Instead, she simply received new teeth and quietly walked out of the dentist's office, unnoticed by anyone. As often happens, especially when a young woman goes missing, suspicions of foul play arose, and an extensive search for the student commenced, accompanied by speculations about potential culprits. For a brief period, there was even a suspect. In 1987, a man named Gunter K. confessed to the police that he had killed Petra. However, his testimony lacked conviction and was not deemed credible. Consequently, in 1989, Pajica was officially declared deceased. Her name remained forgotten until 2015 when an elderly lady residing in Dusseldorf, who went by the name Mrs. Shader, reported a burglary at her apartment to the police. Upon their arrival and request for identification, she confessed that she had no such documents and revealed her true identity as Petra, the same individual who had vanished 28 years earlier. Remarkably, Petra managed to evade detection by abstaining from utilizing banks, refraining from attempting to obtain a driver's license, or even applying for a social security card. Simultaneously, she never faced charges for any criminal activities because she had never attempted to use forged documents. The motives behind Petra Pajica's disappearance remain shrouded in mystery. She informed the police that she had no desire to delve into those reasons and had no intention of reuniting with her family. Edgar Lathiolip. In Hollywood films, amnesia is a recurring plot element, making it seem like a common occurrence. However, the reality is quite different. Memory loss is a remarkably rare phenomenon, so the chances of suddenly recollecting, for instance, that you are the heir to wealthy individuals after escaping from them in an unconscious state, are extremely slim. Nonetheless, this does not imply that cases of amnesia never occur. The story of 21-year-old Edgar Lathiolip, who received treatment in an Ontario hospital after a suicide attempt, serves as undeniable proof of its existence. In 1986, this young man inexplicably vanished from his hospital room, leaving most people assuming the worst, that he had indeed succeeded in taking his own life. In reality, Edgar had suffered a severe head injury during his suicide attempt, which appeared to have triggered a genuine case of amnesia. As a result, he went missing, and it seemed that only his mother, Sylvia Wilson, refused to abandon hope of one day reuniting with her son. Meanwhile, Lathiolip had settled in the Niagara region, living under an assumed name in a hostel for the next 3 decades. Then, in 2016, something extraordinary occurred. He suddenly regained his memory and recalled his true identity. Edgar promptly shared this revelation with social workers, who, upon investigating, discovered that he had been missing for over 30 years. His identity was subsequently confirmed through DNA testing. Needless to say, Edgar Lathiolip's reunion with his mother and relatives proved to be an incredibly emotional and heartwarming moment. J.C. Lee Dugard. Typically, when teenage girls are abducted, the prospect of a positive resolution to the search appears bleak. Unfortunately, more often than not, these cases end in tragedy, with the victims either found deceased or remaining missing. In 1991, when 11-year-old J.C. Dugard disappeared while on her way to the bus stop, where she was scheduled to board a school bus, the police held grim apprehensions. Time elapsed, and despite efforts, no substantial leads emerged, causing the hopes of finding her to dwindle with each passing day. However, astonishingly, Dugard was alive, concealed in a shed within the backyard of Philip and Nancy Garrido's residence in Antioch, California. She was held captive by this disturbed family, who relentlessly conveyed to the young girl that her own family had abandoned her and no longer cared for her. Subjected to their strict control for 18 long years, she gave birth to 2 children with Philip Garrido and, over time, resigned herself to her circumstances, relinquishing any efforts to escape. The Garrido family's audacity led to their downfall. In a misguided attempt to organize a religious gathering, they brought J.C. and her daughters to the University of California at Berkeley campus. An event coordinator at the university immediately sensed that something was amiss with the woman and the girls. Their demeanor appeared unusually submissive and fearful. Following the Garrido's departure, he promptly alerted the police, conveying his suspicions. Thanks to this vigilant individual, the prolonged ordeal of the Dugard family came to an end. In 2009, Jaycee was reunited with her family. Remarkably, the state of California extended a $20 million compensation as an apology to Dugard. It was later revealed that Philip Carrito had been on parole when he abducted Jaycee. Perhaps, had the parole authorities diligently carried out their duties, Dugard might have been rescued much earlier. Kilma Gray. Sometimes, children may be oblivious to the fact that they have been abducted, particularly when it involves a parent who is estranged from the family or when the child is too young to remember their birth family. However, the case of Kilma Gray, who seemingly consented to her own abduction, takes on a very different complexion. In 2007, Kilma Gray went missing at the age of 15, roughly 6 months after she commenced a romantic relationship with 20-year-old Andrew Joshua Tafoy. The police somehow became aware of their relationship, perhaps through a report from the teen's parents, and Tafoy faced the looming threat of incarceration. In a desperate bid to evade this consequence, he resorted to the drastic measure of kidnapping Kilma, taking her to Mexico, and marrying her. Tafoy and Gray's 4-year odyssey of evasion came to an unexpected halt in 2011. It became evident that they were not leading a lawful life, engaging in illicit activities. When Andrew stole a car, the vehicle's owner decided to hire a private investigator since the efficacy of the Mexican law enforcement was notably lacking. The private investigator tracked down the stolen car and found that Andrew and Kilma had taken a liking to it, deciding to keep and drive it around the streets and beaches of Mexico. It remains unclear whether the private investigator's involvement or Kilma's personal choice prompted her return, but she was eventually reunited with her family in 2011. In 2012, Tafoy was extradited to the United States, where he pleaded guilty to kidnapping and was subsequently sentenced to 2 years in prison. After the public attention had waned, Gray moved in with Tafoy's parents and, during the trial, referred to Andrew as her husband, beseeching the judge for leniency. Her parents attributed this behavior to what they believed to be Stockholm Syndrome. Regardless, once Tafoy was released from prison in 2014, the couple opted to live together. Timothy Carney. People can vanish through various means: abduction, murder, amnesia, and, in certain instances, they join religious sects, disappearing from the knowledge of their loved ones. Such appears to be the case with Timothy Carney, who went missing in 2004 after informing his employer of his anticipated tardiness for work. His car was subsequently discovered abandoned halfway to his workplace, suggesting the presence of an ominous secret. Desperate to find their missing son, the Carney family took the extraordinary step of renting hundreds of billboards to display pleas for Timothy's return, yet no one came forward to reveal his whereabouts. 7 years later, the young man was unexpectedly located, evoking a mixture of relief and bewilderment in his parents. Timothy, however, displayed no intention of reuniting with his family and even declined to disclose his precise location over the phone. The exact whereabouts of Timothy Carney remain unknown, but his parents suspect that he fell under the influence of a particular religious movement known as evangelical propaganda, a group that some regard as a cult. Carney's family believes that Timothy disappeared due to the persuasion of religious fanatics who convinced him to abandon his previous life and relocate to an isolated community, where he now remains concealed from the world. Marks Panama Barnes. While most contemporary adoptions follow legal procedures, there are instances where a child's origins remain shrouded in mystery, as exemplified by the story of 35-year-old Steve Carter, who was adopted at the age of 4. Steve's adoptive parents were not to be blamed, for they cherished him deeply, and his childhood was a joyous one. Nonetheless, as Carter grew older, he began to uncover peculiarities in his past. One such oddity was his birth certificate, which had been issued almost a year after his birth and erroneously indicated he was of half Hawaiian descent, despite Steve being a blue-eyed blonde. Over time, his suspicions grew, and in 2011, Carter decided to explore the National Center for Missing Children's website. To his astonishment, he stumbled upon an image of a man named Marks Panama Barnes and immediately recognized himself in it. To validate his intuition, he opted for an anonymous DNA test, which conclusively established that Carter was indeed Barnes, who had gone missing with his mother in July 1977. At the tender age of 3, Marks had found himself in an orphanage, from which he was later taken in by the Carters. The fate of his birth mother remains unclear, with evidence pointing to the likelihood that she had left him at the orphanage doorstep to embark on a new chapter of her life. As of the most recent news reports, Carter had not yet met his biological family but had maintained contact with them through phone conversations. Carlos Sanchez Ortiz. Occupational burnout can affect individuals across all walks of life, from CEOs to everyday waitresses. People cope with it in various ways. Some take extended vacations, others change their careers, and some endure the exhaustion. For Spanish doctor Carlos Sanchez Ortiz, a native of Bilbao, burnout led him to make a radical decision. He walked away from everything and retreated into the woods. To provide context, in 1996, at the young age of 26, he had already earned a medical degree and accrued considerable experience as a doctor. Yet, abruptly, Sanchez found himself grappling with depression, and in late 1996, he simply vanished. Carlos did not inform anyone of his intentions. He gathered a few belongings and, leaving his apartment unlocked, embarked on an unknown journey. Intensive searches were conducted, but to no avail, and in 1998, Ortiz was officially declared deceased. Then, in 2010, 2 mushroom hunters exploring a national park near the Tuscan coast encountered a bearded man seated on a tree trunk, gazing out at the ocean waves. They inquired about his name and whether he required assistance. The man introduced himself as Carlos Sanchez Ortiz and even produced a faded, expired passport. Sanchez informed the mushroom hunters that he had chosen to reside in the area because he desired solitude away from people. However, now, he would have to relocate since the secrecy of his camp's location was no longer assured. Following their encounter, the mushroom pickers alerted the Spanish authorities about Carlos. Subsequently, the authorities conveyed the news to Sanchez's parents, who journeyed to Tuscany in a quest to locate their son but discovered only the remnants of his former hideout. While relieved to hear that he was alive, they expressed their unwavering determination to continue searching. "We respect his desire for independence and freedom," his mother told reporters, "but we yearn to set eyes on him and embrace him once more, even if it's just for one last time." Regrettably, they never succeeded in finding Sanchez, making it highly probable that Carlos still roams the Tuscan coast or the Maremma forest, savoring the wonders of nature and the beauty of the sea. Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina DeJesus. Ariel Castro's residence in Cleveland, where he worked as a school bus driver, presented an eerie and neglected appearance, raising enough concerns among neighbors that they had contacted the police on multiple occasions. What prompted these calls? From time to time, unsettling sounds of banging and screaming emanated from the rear of the house. On one occasion, a neighbor's child even claimed to have spotted a naked woman wandering about Castro's backyard. Law enforcement officers had made several tentative attempts to ascertain what was transpiring inside the house but were never able to gain entry. This impeded efforts to unravel the enigma surrounding the Seymour Avenue residence. Had they managed to enter, they would have encountered 3 of Castro's captives: Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina DeJesus. Castro had kidnapped these women in 2002, 2003, and 2004 and held them in captivity in darkened rooms. To compound the horrors, one of the captives, Amanda Berry, had borne his child in 2006. In 2013, Castro inadvertently left the door to the room where Amanda and her 7-year-old daughter were confined unlocked. Berry seized this opportunity to escape, though her freedom was momentarily hindered by a tall split-rail fence. Amanda's cries for help reached the ears of a neighbor who assisted her in bending back the lower part of the fence, enabling Berry's daughter to exit first, followed by Amanda herself. Shortly thereafter, the police arrived, rescuing the other 2 women and apprehending Castro, who was subsequently sentenced to 1,000 years in prison. Tragically, Castro took his own life in his prison cell after serving only a fraction of his sentence. William Burgess Powell. In 2004, the staff at a Burger King restaurant in Richmond Hill, Georgia, made an unusual discovery when they found a naked man peacefully asleep in one of their dumpsters. Concerned for his well-being, they promptly contacted the police, and the unidentified individual was subsequently transported to the hospital. While he remained conscious, he couldn't recall his name, leading hospital records to designate him as Burger King Doe. Doe retained only a few fragments of his past. He could remember having 3 brothers, his birth date of August 29, 1948, and the likelihood that he had once resided in Denver. Over time, he assumed the name Benjaman Kyle, secured employment, and continued with his life while maintaining the hope of one day unraveling the mystery of his true identity. At one point, Kyle was listed on the FBI's missing persons roster, marking the first instance of an amnesiac man being located with the Bureau's assistance. He also made a notable appearance on the Dr. Phil Talk Show, an episode viewed by nearly 4 million people, though it failed to lead to any concrete identifications. It wasn't until 2016 that forensic genealogy expert Colin Fitzpatrick, examining his DNA, successfully linked Burger King Doe to a man named William Burgess Powell. Powell had disappeared from his home in Lafayette, Indiana, in 1976. However, the revelation of his name only partially resolved the mystery. There is a gap in the record from 1983, the year after his disappearance, until his appearance at Burger King in 2004, during which there is no information about Powell's activities or residence. Even today, despite having his identity restored and a new ID in his possession, Powell remains unable to recall any events from those missing years. I hope you liked this story. Please don't forget to leave a comment sharing with your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up this video, and remember to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more captivating stories. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey, and we'll see you in the next video.